Hi, everyone, and welcome to Adobe Creative Cloud. Thank you so much for attending our workshop today. So, Adobe Creative Cloud, creativity for all. The purpose of this workshop is to pretty much promote awareness about Adobe Creative Cloud because all Elon students, faculty, and staff have access to the Adobe Creative Cloud. And so we just really want to make everyone aware of this because it's a really great tool, whether you're a student and you want to create a project to show that you've mastered content, whether you're faculty or staff and you want to create instructional materials, print materials, I mean, you name it, and Adobe can pretty much create those resources for you. So in this session, we will provide you with an overview of some of the most commonly used Adobe applications that can be very useful, whether you're a faculty, student, or a staff member. And it's important also to realize that you don't have to be a communications major or an art major to really take advantage of these tools. It's really built for everyone. We're going to give you a brief overview of some of the most commonly used tools within the suite. Adobe has so many tools that it will be impossible to share everything with you today. So each of the presenters selected a tool that they thought was most useful for you to be able to use. And so they're going to just give you an overview of how to use that tool. And then at the end, you're also going to get plenty of resources that you can use so that you can dig deeper into whatever that tool is that you want to learn how to use, or maybe you want to learn how to use that tool a lot better. So we're going to give you plenty of resources so that you'll be able to do that. So the full suite features applications for video as well as design, photography, web development. And you'll find tools, really popular tools like Adobe Photoshop, as well as Illustrator, Adobe Spark, and Adobe Acrobat DC. So just to give you an idea of just all of the tools that are available to you, and this is just a snapshot of what there is, of what Adobe has to offer. So in order to gain access to your free Adobe account, you will need to navigate to elon.edu/technology. And if you're a student, select the Student Tech Guide. And if you're a faculty, select Faculty and Staff Tech Guide. And then from there, the options are pretty much the same. Navigate down to hardware, software, and printing, expand the menu. And then from there, click on the link that will take you to a knowledge-based article that will tell you everything that you need to know in order to download the suite onto your device, as well as how to log into the suite for the very first time using your Elon credentials. So really quick, I want to give you just a preview of what you will see once you've downloaded the application. So this is what the icon looks like on your desktop. Once you open up the desktop application, you'll see 3 categories for desktop, mobile, as well as the web. So looking at the desktop application, you'll see these are the apps that I've downloaded, and you have the option to download and install all of these apps onto your personal computer here. And you also have mobile applications. So because I'm actually on the desktop, in this example, I have an option to send a link to a mobile device and I can download the application from there. Adobe also has some really great web tools that you can use. I'm a really big fan of Adobe Spark. So if you want to create posts or just any type of infographics, Spark is really great. Over on the left, you have different categories. So you can also sort the apps into categories depending on your need. And one of my favorite things are the tutorials. Adobe has some really great tutorials to teach you how to use any other products that they have. So in this presentation, I will be presenting Adobe Premiere Rush to you, which is a really simple video editing tool. And Ted's going to follow behind me and show you more advanced editing tools with Adobe Premiere Pro, followed by Denise with InDesign. And JP will be wrapping up our session today with Illustrator as well as Photoshop. So at this time, let's take a look at Adobe Premiere Rush. So this is what Adobe Premiere Rush will look like when you first open up the application. You have the option here to create a new project. But before I select create a new project, I just want to talk about the help menu really quick because the very first time that you open Premiere Rush, it will a start tour a tutorial will pop up and it's interactive and it's really great because all the videos and everything that you need to create your first little video project are already in there. And so it gives you little helpful tips like click here, click there with little pop-up menus that explain what you're clicking on. And the tour only takes about 5 minutes. So I really recommend going through the tour before you start a project for the first time. And even if you have already gone through the tour, you can always go back to the help menu and start the tour again. This time I'm going to select create a new project. And I'm going to name my project Spring Flowers. I don't know about you guys, but I really have spring fever right now. And I'm so excited about all of the colorful flowers and everything that are out there. And so here I'm going to navigate to my pictures folder, and I've already created a folder for all of the pictures that I would like to put in my video. It's also important to note that in addition to video clips, you can also add still images into your video as well. So here you can see I'm just selecting different clips and images that I want to appear in my video. And for each clip and image that I select, it assigns a number to it. So this will be the order that it's going to appear in my timeline or my video sequence. So it'll depending on how many clips you're loading, it'll take a few seconds rather to load. And then I can select play and just see how my video has turned out without any editing at all. So just going through this, I can see some of my clips are a lot longer than others. So I can go through the timeline here and I can select different clips and images. And each one of them that I select, you'll notice that a gold border appears around it. And with that, I can actually hover over and I can choose to lengthen or shorten the clip. So here I'm going to take a little bit off at the end and trim a little bit off at the beginning. And I really want my image to be longer. So I'm going to zoom into my sequence here so that I can see more of my image and I can expand the amount of time that this picture is going to be in my video. In addition to trimming clips, you also have the option to cut clips. So I'm going to zoom out of my sequence and I'm going to cut this clip here. So I'm going to select it and place my playhead in the place that I would like to split, and then select the scissor tool over here on the left and split that part out of it. And I can choose to reorder it somewhere else, or I can simply delete it. And so now that I've gone through and I've trimmed my clips and I've taken a look at all of the different options that I have here, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some finishing touches to it. So there are two ways that I can actually add different graphics into my sequence. I can select the Add Media plus here in the top right, or I can select the graphics tool over here on the right. So selecting the graphics tool over here on the right, I can add graphic. And here you can see the different titles, transitions, as well as overlays will load. By selecting more, I can see a full list. And I'll select one to add, so I can select it and press add, or I can click and drag it directly into my sequence. And so once I've done that, I can edit the default text that says modern title. So placing my cursor there, I can delete all of that. and add my title. So once I've done that, you notice that over here on the right, I do have an option menu for my text. So I can choose to edit the font if I choose to, and there are lots of fonts in here. You also have access to all of Adobe's fonts. So before selecting a font, make sure that you actually select your text there so that you can see it change. And you also have an option to change the text color. So I can go into my color picker and select a different color if I choose. I can also toggle the box to add an outline. So same thing, I have the color picker, or I can use the eyedropper and I can select colors that are actually in any of my video clips or images. And since it's really hard to see it, I can change the outline size, and that really makes it a lot more pronounced. So I can always move my playhead and press play and see what that animation looks like. So in addition to adding titles, you also have the option to add transition graphics. So we can click and drag those where we would like for them to go. And just like with your images and videos, you can also choose to lengthen and shorten these as well. So once you add these templates in, you also have different, depending on what the template is, you can modify and change different colors that are in that template. So you can see here for this template, I can change the shape, colors, and also the different shapes that are in this effect. And then just zooming into a sequence gives me the option to be able to lengthen that clip. So in addition to transitions, you also have overlays. So navigating to the image that I have of the tulips, that's one of my favorite flowers. So I can choose to add an overlay over top of that. So just move that directly over the image and trim it down a little bit. And here you can see that my overlay pops up. And just like with the other templates, you can also adjust the colors there as well. So over here on the right, you also have different effects for adding other transitions between your clips. So I can add a transition here. I can change to adjust the duration of it, and you'll see that that transition actually appeared in between these two clips. And moving my playhead and playing, you can see what that transition looks like. So when I'm all done with my video, the next thing there is to do is to actually share it. So at the very top, we select share. So you have some options here. You can choose to download it onto your device by selecting your file location and saving your project to, and selecting the export button here. And it's really nice that you can actually publish directly to YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram by logging into any of your accounts here. And you also have the option to publish to Adobe Behance, which is pretty much a site that Adobe has where people can share their creative projects. So you can also share them there and get feedback on your project as well. So that pretty much wraps up Adobe Premiere Brush. So at this time, Ted is going to follow behind me and he's going to tell you about some advanced tools with Adobe Premiere Pro.
What you're seeing on the screen right now, one of the things that was come up with about 100 years ago now was what's called the Kuleshov effect. The idea that there's this editing concept of montage in film where putting pictures next to each other creates meaning that wasn't necessarily there with the images on their own. Filmmaker named Kuleshov in Soviet Union, like around 19 teens, realized he put the same image of a guy looking into the camera next to a bowl of soup, and the audience thought, oh, he looks like he's hungry. next to, a child in a coffin, and they're like, oh, he's grieving for this child. And beautiful girl, they're thinking, oh, he's like, having these feelings about this, woman who's shown here. But it turns out it was actually the same clip of the guy all three times. And it's just the context that makes it work. And that's the magic of editing. So we're talking about some of the tools you all are familiar with. There's an old phrase in photography that kind of got codified when someone named a book after it in 2009, but the idea that the best camera is the one that's with you. And I feel like sort of a similar thing applies with video editing tools. Is the best one is what you've already got or what you're familiar with. So up at the top here, you're going to see, for example, there's Microsoft Photos, ships with Windows. It's free. It's on your computer already if you have a Windows machine. Or else similar, there's iMovie. A couple of y'all are familiar with that. Ships with Mac. It's a free tool. It's a great place to get started. Step above that, if you want to step up your game a little bit, there's Premiere Rush, which Kendra was showing us how to use a moment ago. There's also a tool called Camtasia, which some of y'all might be familiar with as a screen recorder. It also has some basic editing tools built into that as well. I've used it a couple of times. Then we've got Final Cut Pro, which Ben was mentioning as a tool that he's used before. That's something that's had some evolution and bumps over the years as time's gone by, but it's gotten back to a pretty respectable level with the tool sets available. Something called DaVinci Resolve from Blackmagic Design is interesting because there's a lot of power available with it for free, but there's a paid version that doesn't give you a whole lot more, but it's pretty cheap. But it's been familiar in film and TV production for years because it's used for color correction on high-end, feature films. It's used on pretty much everything, but they've started adding editing features. So now you can have, just a kid in high school downloading this tool for free that's really powerful and has a deep feature set that's just available for anyone to use, which is kind of an interesting development. So it kind of gets used all across the board. I was just kind of trying to situate where Premiere fits into the ecosystem of nonlinear editing tools for video cutting. And Premiere is mostly used by more like professional folks. It's used on some films and TV shows. A lot of documentaries will use it, but for bigger features, people are pretty much going to be cutting in Avid Media Composer, which is the next step above of even more kind of complicated and annoying to use. So just wanted to give you all a sense of like, what is Premiere Pro? How does that fit into how people use, professional video editing tools? And one thing that's nice about Premiere is that it is part of this larger galaxy of tools that's available through Adobe. So it integrates really well with a tool called After Effects, which is a high-end compositing and visual effects tool that's used for creating motion graphics and doing green screen effects and all sorts of really high-end work for everything from feature films to commercials and weddings and everything in between. It also ties into a tool called Audition, which is really powerful and useful audio editor. Although I will say there's a lot of strong audio editing tools that are already built in within Premiere. And so I don't find myself going out to that tool very much. There's another one called Prelude, which is a tool for ingesting and sort of organizing all your media and getting it well tagged before you start editing. Because as any experienced video editor will tell you, the most important first step is getting all your data organized and backed up. And if you don't do that, you're going to really hate yourself later. So one exciting thing that's coming soon to Premiere is there's a lot stronger captioning tools that are going to be available that will allow you to make your videos more accessible and also just more usable in a lot of online formats. I'm sure a lot of y'all have probably turned captions on for videos just in situations where, you don't have headphones with you, or you're in a public place, or you just want to quickly scan through something without watching the whole thing just to find out, how this guy is telling you to fix your lawnmower or whatever. My current caption workflow is a little bit convoluted. I'll use Microsoft Stream to generate a transcript, and then I'll remove some of the formatting with a tool called BBEdit, and then I'll bring it into a tool called Transcriptive to make it a more easily editable format, and then I'll mess with it in Notepad, and then I'll bring it back into Transcriptive and export it again for Word, which is kind of a hassle. but really excited about this upcoming feature that's going to be available within Premiere in probably the next release or two. There is a beta version right now for doing automatic speech to text within Premiere itself, and they've added some captioning tools. So if you already have captions done, you can add that directly within Premiere. But the speech to text is coming soon. It's going to be using Adobe Sensei, which is Adobe's artificial intelligence program to convert anything that people are saying into written text that you can then edit, and then you can export it as closed captions that people can turn on and off, or else you can burn it in on the screen. And they've added some tools to make it a lot easier to do good formatting so that those look prettier. You can export them later on. So anyway, I wasn't going to get too much into the nitty-gritty of how to actually edit videos because that can be a lot. And I appreciate Kendra's high-level overview earlier. So that's it for mine. If y'all have any questions, feel free to add them in the chat. And otherwise, I will pass over and stop sharing. And it is up to Denise next.
Great. Thanks for my 1 extra minute that I'm going to give up to JP because he's got 2 things to cover. So we're going to talk about InDesign. And InDesign is Adobe's page layout program. And it's really good for both print and digital. I was very excited. I've used InDesign for about 25 years for print layout. And have never done any of their digital publishing. So it was fun to play around with a little bit of that, what you could do with it. But we're going to do just a quick demo of what InDesign looks like and the different types of things you can do with it. So I'm going to try to share my screen. See if I can find it. Of course, I can't find what I need. Hold on. All right. So hopefully, and if you guys can let me know, because I can no longer see anybody in this, whether you can see Adobe InDesign.
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Okay. So one thing I want to say about Adobe InDesign is it's got a lot of features that are similar to a word processor, but I tend not to work with it, with text in it the same way as I would a word processor. I would do most of my typing and grammar checking and spell checking in Word and then bring it into InDesign. You can still do a lot of formatting here, and you can use it as a word processor kind of tool if you want, but I think it's easier to import. So we've got just somebody's little resume here that I'm going to bring some text in to show you. And again, the text was created in Word. So I'm just simply going to place the text from Word. And sorry, I have to find where I have it because these things change. And it's just a simple Word document. And you notice when I get the text, my cursor becomes loaded with the thing that I'm trying to place. So I can see a little bit about what I have there. And I'm going to show you what happens. I'm going to go where I want the text to go, and I'm just going to click to place it. And because I don't have my document set up quite properly with with columns, that placed wrong. So I'm going to get rid of it and try again and show you guys what we should actually do. And basically, I'm going to create a text frame where I start, click, and drag where I want the text to flow. And Adobe will then pull it in for me. And you can see I already did a lot of formatting in Word, so I don't have to do a lot more here, but I can. And if you notice about this, I've got my experience by this icon, my technical skills by this icon, my education should be by this icon. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how you can thread text and do different text frames with that. So I'm going to make my text block just a little bit smaller. And once I do that, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Hopefully you'll be able to see it. I've got this plus sign right here, and that shows me that I have text to thread. So if I click in that plus sign, it will load my cursor again with text. I'm going to zoom back out. And again, because I don't have this set up in columns, I'm going to press and drag where I want my text to go. And you see this little strange thing, but that's just showing me where my text is threaded. So I can see that if I make a change to the top, which I'm pointing to with my finger and you can't see, it might flow into this text block down here. I can turn that off using my view window. I'm just going to hide it because I think it's hard to work with. Now I can move this all around. I could move it to another page and it would just thread automatically for that. So, and in fact, I'll just show you a little bit. If I change the size of this one, you'll see what happens. So you can see how the text is set together and threaded there. So that's just real simple, putting some text in. And you can see in this document, I've got this one a little bit different. This is a document with 3 columns, which I think is a nice feature in Adobe. I can create my columns when I create my document, or I can actually make changes to it later on, as long as I don't have anything selected here. Over on this side, I have information about the document and the pages. And if I edit my page here, I can change the number of columns. So say I want to have 2 columns instead of 3, Adobe's going to redraw my columns, and then I would have to re-thread my, or oh, I'm sorry, things are locked here. Shouldn't be doing that. I should be able to redraw my sizes, but I've got it locked down, so I'm going to undo that. We'll go back to doing other things. So once you've got columns, you can change that up all that you want in the document anytime you want. Now in this one, I'm also going to add some graphics. So I've got a graphic placeholder right here. It's called a graphic frame. And I can easily create a graphic frame of any type. Say I wanted to have an ellipse frame. I can draw just an ellipse here, which again is a simple frame that is set there for me to put something in it later. And just to show you how easy that is, with this frame selected, I'm going to place a document, a graphic into it. Find my graphics again. And I'm going to put my jellyfish right here. And notice that the jellyfish goes into the frame in exact the same shape that the frame is in. Going to put something in this one, also place. And that one is my lionfish. And finally, just to show you, you don't have to have a frame. If I have nothing selected, I can place a graphic sea turtle. There we are. Just by clicking and dragging, and the graphic will go into the area that I put. Now, one of the nice things about working with graphics in Adobe, if you look at this right now, if I click on this, you see, and let me zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit better. You can see the border of the frame, but I have this strange little thing in the middle. If I click on that, I'm actually getting the border of the graphic, and you can see it's got a different color. So my graphic is bigger than my frame, and it just kind of crops down to the frame size or displays in that. I can actually move my graphic within my frame. So say I wanted to see this fish over here a little bit, I can move it around. I still have the same amount of space on the page being taken up, but a different portion of the graphic. I can also, let me zoom up to this one. Again, you click on this and I select the graphic. I could resize the graphic if I wanted to. I'm just going to resize a little bit. Let's do that better. Resize, move my graphic around, and I can even try to keep it within the frame there. I can even rotate my graphic. So if you notice, I come to this little corner and I've got the option to rotate. So I can do all sorts of different things with the graphic in the frame. Okay. The other thing I can do is, again, in this graph, this jellyfish is the size of the frame. So that's really nice. If I change the size of the frame itself, it does not change the size of the image within it. So in order to change the size, I can get it selected and then choose over here in the frame fitting, I can choose to fill it proportionally, and it will reduce my graphic down to the size of the frame. So nice things that you can do with graphics. And JP is going to walk us through some programs that you can create these in. And guys, I'm seeing I've got 3 minutes left, so I have to talk really quick. One other thing I wanted to show is in this document, you can wrap your text around graphics. So it's really nice that you don't have to worry about resizing your text blocks or the graphics. You can make Photoshop, InDesign do this for you. And to do this, I'm going to select my graphic. And over here, I'll zoom in a little bit. You can see I have text wrap. And right now the text is going across the graphic. If I click this one, which is wrapping around the bounding box, it will move my text outside of the graphic. And you can also see that my text is too big for that. That's not what I wanted to do. There we go. But you can see that it is wrapping my text. Now I can increase the distance. You can see right now that text is right up against the edge of the graphic. And to do that, I have to come over here and I choose if I'm going to increase the left side, the right side, the top, or the bottom. So I want to increase some text on the right, some space, sorry. And as I move it over, you can see what happens. Now, another cool thing you can do with this is you can kind of create your own shapes. The frame shapes are the polygon, the oval, and the square or rectangle, but I can make my own shape by using something called the direct selection tool. And I'm going to do that real quick. I'm going to whoops. You actually have to get the right thing. Let's try that again. I got a size and I'm still moving it. All right, this is not working the way it's supposed to, guys, so I'm going to stop doing it. I'm not going to waste time. I can actually change the shape of this. If I can get that square just right, and I'm not getting it just right, I could make it into a diagonal, but I'm not going to waste any more time doing that for you. I can also correct color or add colors. So if I select the text, I can use my eyedropper to choose a color anywhere in this graphic to have the text match it. So I'm going to try that color right there, and you'll see that my text has changed. And if I click off of it, we'll be able to see a little bit better. Using the text tool, I can even change that color a little bit more by clicking over here. And let's choose a color. It's not perfect. There we go. So now it's blue, sort of matches. Another thing I want to point out, I mentioned that you can use a lot of formatting just like you can with a word processor. One of the nicest things about Adobe Creative Cloud is that you have access to the full Adobe Fonts library. And so I love fonts. I must have 250,000 fonts installed on my system. But the nice thing is that I can use any Adobe font there is out there for free. It's part of our subscription. So if I wanted to use, let's see. Oh, I want something called Adventure. I like that. When I choose it, it's going to automatically activate and install that font so that I can use it whenever I want. It takes a little bit of time. I don't know if you guys saw, I had a preview there as I chose Adventure. You saw what it was going to look like, but I'm in the process of activating it. So in a few minutes, Adventure will actually be a font that I have on my system that I can use. So that's a really nice thing that we can do with Adobe. And I have no time left, so I'm going to stop sharing and tell you that there is also this lovely interactive things that you can do where you can add animation, you can add links to websites for doing online publishing of digital documents. So anybody have any questions?
The chat is all clear.
Okay.
So I don't see
great.
anything in there.
All right, JP.
All right, y'all. So we're going to talk about Photoshop and Illustrator real quick. I'm going to go through a couple things you need to know first before we even start talking about it. So I'm going to share my screen. And let's go. Okay. So Photoshop and Illustrator. Now, they could seem very familiar, but there's very distinct differences and very distinct differences about when you might use them. Okay, so let's talk about some of that. Two terms you need to know for this that are going to be very useful, and I'll explain what they mean. The first is raster, okay? And that pretty much just means pixel-based. So anybody who's seen an image that looks really pixelized, we're talking about squares or points of color that make up an entire image, okay? And then we also have vector. And that pretty much means these are paths built from math, okay? Now, the big difference is raster, when you zoom into raster, you'll actually start to see pixels, okay? But when you zoom into vector, no pixels at all. The lines are completely smooth no matter how far you zoom in, okay? Now, this is a big difference, and I'll explain why this really makes a difference here. First, okay? This is Elon's logo, okay? Now, if Elon's logo is created in vector, which it is, that means I can use it at any size. So I can shrink it down as small as a business card, or I can blow it up and put it on a billboard, okay? And it'll look great at any size because it's vector, it's math, I can scale it any size. However, if I created it originally this small, right, in raster, then when I blow it up for that billboard, it's going to look something like this, right? Way worse, right? So that's the difference there. However, it's not all rosy on the vector side. So if you want to do an image or use an image or a photograph and deal with that in vector, you get something that looks like this. It's almost like a painting. You know, it doesn't do a good job with realistic looking graphics like that. Versus raster, which will give you the exact same image, but it'll look gorgeous, right? Because most cameras, or all cameras, shoot in that raster format in pixels, okay? They capture everything in pixels. Vector doesn't really do a good job of that, okay? So I tell you those two things because both of these programs deal with a different one. So Photoshop deals in raster, okay? While Illustrator deals in vector. Now, for me, what I tend to use them for is I'll use Photoshop for a lot of photo manipulation and editing, right? Now, don't get me wrong, Photoshop can do almost anything, including some video editing. It can really, I mean, it's just massive what it can do. But I tend to focus on using it for this photo editing and manipulation. And I'll use Illustrator then for print design and logos. So I'll create layouts, I'll create graphics and the like for print when I don't know exactly what size it's going to be, you know, or a logo. If I'm going to create a logo, I don't know what size it needs to be. So I need to create it in a program in a way that I can scale it up as big as the size, you know, of a billboard or small as business card, you know. So I tend to use Illustrator for print design and logos. Now I am sharing Illustrator. Okay, so one of the first things you'll probably recognize is this looks very familiar to InDesign. Matter of fact, it probably looks very familiar. I mean, it looks familiar to Premiere and a lot of the other programs because Adobe's done us a favor and made all their things kind of work similarly. So we've got these tabs across the top. You've got your tools over here. You've got these panels on the right-hand side over here, all of which are very consistent. You see some of these same things in InDesign, we just saw them in. You'll see them again and again across all products. And we'll see it again in Photoshop when we get in there. But what I want to do right now is I just want to show you that there are some basic things that I use this for a lot, like creating very basic shapes, right? It gives us the option to create all the different, we'll call them elements of design in the shapes, including we can do pretty much any shape you can imagine, okay? And it gives us these basic shapes that we can then play around with and we can scale and we can do whatever we want with. But it doesn't stop there. It also adds in the ability to modify these shapes. For example, if I want this square to have rounded corners, it gives me the ability to do just that. Or if I want this triangle to be a little odd, I can do that as well. And the same thing with the circle. It allows me to edit any of these things to my heart's content to play around with, right? So that I really can make any shape I could ever desire, right? So this works great. And remember, I was telling you that you can zoom into this as far as you want and you will never see any pixels, right? I'm just zooming and zooming and zooming. I'm not seeing any pixels along the edge because it's all created by math, right? So it's all that vector. So not only does it allow you to do shapes though, it also allows you to play around with text. Now, very similar to what you just saw in InDesign. If I click and let go, I have some text here that I can, type and do whatever I want with, right? And I also have another option. I can click and drag, and now I've made a text area. Now, these two things function just a little bit different. This text box up here that I didn't click and drag, I just clicked and let go, allows me to now scale this text to any size I want. Okay, and it treats it as vector, which means, right, I'm never going to see any pixels or anything like that with it, right? However, this text box that I just created, if I scale this box, notice it starts changing how my text lives in that box, okay? So I can go through and change this box and make it work however I want. This also works with that text linking that Denise showed us. The same concept works here as well. You can do that here. So I wanted to show you a few things that I created here using Illustrator. One, I didn't create this. This is the Elon logo. It is indeed in Vector, right? And you can actually see how it was created in Vector, okay? And if I wanted to go into, and this, we shouldn't ever do this, but if you want to go in and modify things, you can modify it, okay? Now, University of Communications is going to say, don't ever do that, but Illustrator would allow us to do that. Also, going over here, here's some designs that we did for the Maker Takeover. It allowed us to do a bunch of different designs for them, print, stuff for social media, little handouts, and the same for opening of school. When we were introducing Philo, which is their TV program, these are posters that ended up on there, as well as handouts that we left on the beds. But it allows us to, arrange graphics, create graphics, all in that vector type format, and then allows us to print them without losing any quality. Okay? Any questions about that? I can't see the chat, but any questions about Illustrator before we pop on to Photoshop?
Nothing in the chat.
All right. Next up, Photoshop. Y'all ready for some magic? Because this is magic. Okay. So one of my favorite things about Photoshop, I do some photography and everything, and this allows you to manipulate and edit photos at will. So what I want to show you right here is I have a bunch of photos brought in to Photoshop right now, okay? And these photos are all kind of taken in order. I literally stood outside my parents' house and the storm was coming in, and I started taking a picture and I held it down and was like click, 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 and I stopped taking the pictures. Now, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to put these things together. So if I go to File, Automate, Photo Merge, add these open files, and let this work for a second while I talk about the layout of Photoshop. Notice, like I said before, right? Illustrator, InDesign, notice how the layout looks very familiar, right? We've got these panels on the side, we've got our tools on the left-hand side, we've got these tabs across the top, right? So you have all these different things that are, different tools out there that are used for different things, but they have a very similar feel. So when you get used to one Adobe product, you tend to know where to find other things in other Adobe products, okay? So that's very, very useful. Now, what this is doing is this is running a process that takes all of those individual photos that I had, puts them all into one document. Then it lines them all up and blends them all together. So it's one seamless composition, okay? And you'll see just about now, here is that photo, right? So we've got the entire photo. It was approximately 8 or 9 pictures that it went through, and it did all this crazy stuff for us to make it all one photo. Now, that's cool in and of itself. I absolutely love that it does that for me. But you can see that, I have all these blank areas down here and at the top and everything. And normally I would just crop those out. There are crop tools, but we can go a little bit further with this. So if I go in,
you do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
So Ted wants to know, are there different layout options?
Different layout options for?
Different types of tasks you might want to do within Photoshop.
Oh, yeah. Well, so I'll say this, when you say layout, you can customize the layout to your heart's content. There is this Windows panel at the top here. And then there's something called Workspace. And you can see here, Essentials, 3D, graphics and web, motion, painting, photography. Those are preset layouts of things that you can do. I know Premiere does that as well. It has preset layouts that you can arrange all the panels and everything that you want in a specific way to help aid you in whatever you're doing. Does that answer your question?
And there was one more question from Denise. And Denise, are you asking about what JP did with the pictures? Has this option been around for a while, or is this new to 2021?
Believe it or not, this has been around for quite a while. So much so that I've been doing it for, 10, 11 years.
Panorama?
So, yep. Automate, blending the pictures together. It has been around for quite a while. Now, a thing that hasn't been around for as long is what's called content-aware fill. So you can see that I've selected all these extra areas here. If I use content-aware fill, Photoshop takes a look at all of these areas and takes a look at the surrounding areas and says, you know what? You may not have taken a picture of it, but that's okay. We're going to just guess about what it would look like around there. And you can see all of my edges now are filled in seamlessly. I didn't take the pictures, but I didn't have to, because Photoshop will pay attention and it'll kind of look at what's out there. And then it'll allow you to, or it'll go ahead and fill in some of these areas, which is pretty amazing for me. Now, another thing that we can do real quick is this is a cool photo, but this is not what I saw. And anybody who's taken pictures knows it's really hard to get exactly what you saw in the picture. But Photoshop can allow us to get closer to that. So I'm going to use something called Camera Raw, and this is kind of a plugin. And I'm going to go real quick with this, but I'm going to change some things to make this look a little bit more menacing, which is the way I saw it. Okay. So you can kind of see the before, kind of bland and whatever. The after, way more punchy, right? This is more of what I saw when I went out there and got excited about a storm front coming in, right? So it allows us to edit a lot of those look and feel, right? Okay, now this is one of my favorite things. Okay, so I've got this kind of house and this power line over here, and it's okay, but I would, sometimes there are things that I would rather not be in there. So using that same content aware fill, I can go in here, select just this area, use the content aware fill. It's gone. Same thing with this red house here. Maybe I don't want to see this anymore. Content aware fill. It's gone now too, right? Like it was never there. Now, when I show my students this, I preface this with, you should now never trust anything you see in a photograph again, because I can simply remove, change. If I have this, if I have this right here that I don't want in there, there are plenty of tools that allow me to go in and hide some of this stuff. So say I will take a little bit of what is right here and I will just paint it over the top here. We'll do a little bit better job for you there. Match it up a little bit more. All right. And that driveway's gone, right? So there are a ton of little tools like this that you can use in Photoshop. Say I like these, this little patch of flowers here. I can take that and now I can add these things anywhere I want, right? So it offers a ton of potential to go through, edit, change. anytime you've ever seen a full group technology picture, you have never, ever seen one that has not been edited. We have never been able to get everybody there at one time, which means that bless Ted's heart, he'll have to take some other pictures of people that aren't there by themselves and then give them to me, and I will edit them in, right? I will add them in using Photoshop and some of these same tools that I just showed you. So with that, I will stop the Photoshop side of it. But like I said, it's extremely powerful and very useful, especially when you want to go about editing and retouching photos, making photos look better. Any questions? Go ahead, stop sharing the screen.
It doesn't look like there's anything in the chat.
All right. That was the quickest go through of Illustrator. I literally teach an entire semester on these things.
I just want to thank Ted, JP, and Denise again for sharing your knowledge with us about the tools that you use most frequently in Adobe Creative Cloud. So at this time, we are going to wrap things up. I do want to share with you guys, as we mentioned, there are a ton of resources that are available in Adobe. So depending on what your need is, what the project is, that will determine the tool that you'll want to use. I just placed a link in the chat, which is a helpful PDF that pretty much breaks all of the tools down into categories. So if you want to do a photo project, you can simply click on the link for photo, and then it shows you all the photo apps, and it even goes as far as it categorizes it to whether you're a beginner, expert level, or if you fall somewhere in the middle. So, just a really quick guide to help you select your tools. As I also mentioned, there are a ton of resources available as well. And if you maybe missed the beginning part of it with connecting to your Elon account, here is a link to our LinkedIn learning path. And so there's a video in there that walks you through how to connect to your Elon Adobe Creative Cloud account. And also in the presentation. So in the presentation that we're going to share out with everyone, again, other applications, you have Adobe Apps for Education, which is really great. Also, I know a lot of faculty and staff may be using Adobe Acrobat, so that's also available in the Creative Cloud, especially if you are creating your portfolio. So at any time, you can reach out to TLT for a consultation. We will be more than happy to help you with the questions that you may have about Adobe or any other technology related questions. And there's also a list of other resources here. So it doesn't look like there are any questions. Thank you guys so much for attending our workshop, and please reach out if you do have questions. Take care.